Hello, Internet. I am here today to have a nice little monologue about something that I've always held very dear to my heart, and that is suicidal depression. Depression is one of those things that people like to pretend that they know and care about, but realistically, well adjusted people are incapable of actually knowing what it's like or really caring about the people experiencing it because of your inherent self preservation instinct. So I'm here to help drag you all down to my level. Now I've been suicidally depressed for about a decade now. There's a great number of factors contributing to this, and I assure you that they are all completely logical. My nature, if you will, is incompatible with that of humanity, and I have no capacity to self-actualize within this amoral and ignorant American society that I find myself part of. As such, I'm cursed to suffer until I die, and as such, it would be beneficial to die earlier rather than later. Um, Now, due to the general consensus that the people I know enjoyed siphoning my delicious goddess essence off of my soul and would essentially inherit my suffering if I were to die in such an early fashion, I feel somewhat obliged to continue suffering so that I might find ways to alleviate them of their pain. Let's see. My suicidal tendencies started in high school. Back then, I think that many of my peers suffered from the strange misconception that either I was cool or that I thought that I was cool, which were both completely untrue. I would often hear rumors of little girlies having crushes on me because I was so quiet, mysterious, and talented, and my teachers would often accuse me of inevitable success because I aced tests and excelled athletically without a whole lot of effort. Of course, none of that actually told the tale of how I feel on the inside. Eh, I've always had this sort of intensely irrational anxiety. Having been half homeschooled for the entirety of my education, social situations in general always filled me with a kind of overwhelming and unnecessary stress and dread. Um, I never necessarily wore those emotions on my face in social situations because I understand the nature of social posturing and I don't want to look like a fool, so I just wear a placid mask instead. In any case, recognizing my own inability to overcome my irrational social anxiety bullshit, I realized I would probably never get along in society and should ideally just die young. I often fantasized about how confused and distressed all of those little school peers would have been if they had heard that I'd just suddenly off myself one day, and that notion delighted me. Unfortunately, I survived high school and even made it out with a couple of friends. Literally a couple, like two. Anyways, of course, I would never want to burden my friends with the truth of my suffering, and my family is obviously kind of just incapable of comprehending or assisting such a perspective. So my death desire simply lays simmering at the bottom of my heart, boiling the pot of my soul. And don't even talk to me about counselors or psychiatrists or psychologists. That's just psychological prostitution, and quite frankly, I find it more disgusting and dishonest than regular prostitution. I'm not gonna pay some predatory, greedy, entitled asshole to give me fake empathy. I don't think so. If I can't find real empathy amongst real people and real communication, then why bother? Who needs it? Now, after high school, I went to college because it seemed like what was expected, and I wasn't really inspired to research or go to any of the cool universities that were contacting me about athletics and stuff because I just wasn't inspired. I don't know. Well, in college, alright, the reason this all sounds silly is because I'm trying to read it from a really tiny script that I wrote, and it's tiny and it's hard to read, so I'm kind of just like struggling and hesitating and blah blah blah. Anyways, where was I? Well, in college, I met for the first time a girl who I wanted to give my love to. But of course, my communication barriers overwhelmed me, and as I had only so far essentially in life figured out how to communicate as a parody of various caricatures in my own mind, without any real capacity to express or even interpret my own true desires. Knowledge of this continued irrational anxiety and these unnecessary self-imposed barriers made me realize that I'm never gonna find love or any other such delicious cheese. Um, I'll definitely live a loveless life, ineffective, broken island of a person with no real ability to connect with anyone on a meaningful level. Um, Death would obviously be my only reprieve from such incompetence. Sometime around then, I started cutting myself. Many people in their own shallow self-importance think that when somebody's cutting themselves, they're only doing it to get your attention. But that might be the case for some people, but that wasn't really how I interpreted it. I've never really cared much for what other people think, since I find most people really shallow and boring. But the pain of that sort of thing, it just feels good in a way. Like it creates a sort of endorphin rush that I don't know. It might have started out with the idea that, oh, my mind is suffering, so my body should suffer too. But it really actually kind of alleviates that mental suffering. It creates the sort of endorphin rush that makes the irrational tendencies of the emotional mind just kindly shut the fuck up for a little while. And anyways, I cut my legs mostly because nobody would see that. But I also cut a big old DNA strand into the underside of my left arm, and I cut a bunch of stars into my feet. And I don't know, I suppose I actually almost killed myself once. I cut somewhat deep into my right wrist, but instead of going all the way, I just delighted myself by drawing a bunch of pictures in my own blood on the bathroom shower walls. That was fun. So much fun. Anyways, I dropped out of college that year. What's the point of making money if I'm only going to spend it on myself and I've never even cared about material possessions? What's the point of indebting myself to be a slave in a society that I find morally objectionable? What's the point of existing when everybody else exists so much more happily and agreeably? I decided after that to attempt to travel. Perhaps I could find some peace of mind by rediscovering myself, going on a vision quest, and realizing that I'm a pretty fucking cool cat goddess when it all comes down to it. But so I spent about 5 years wandering around the West Coast, meeting a bunch of filthy badass nerds and playing video games with them. Mostly Super Smash Bros. Melee, of course, because it's the greatest game of all time. Unfortunately, my suicidal tendencies even obstructed my ability to play my games, or my gaming career, or whatever. I mean, Melee allows for so many potential movement options and abilities and blah 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 that you really express your soul through your playstyle, whether you like it or not. And as such, I inevitably express my own ability to control my mind and my own desire to die by making a lot of really stupid technical mistakes that I shouldn't make, and by killing myself in tournaments on accident a lot against really mediocre players. So, yeah. I know if I could overcome my own stupid irrational issues, I would instantly be way better, not only at gaming, but at everything else every day, just competence. But it's not that easy. Oh, okay. I know I would instantly be way better at not only my favorite game, but at helping to create the optimal world that I can envision, a world where greed is abandoned and altruism replaces that foolish notion and encourages everyone to share knowledge and opportunity and food with one another without hesitation. That's the optimal world. But no, this is hell. Anyways, but alas, It is not so easy to overcome such ingrained depression. I am every bit the same anxious fool with no hope of ever properly socializing, but I am now burdened with additional debt that I don't ever really care to acknowledge. And with the fact that everything I owned was stolen from me during my travels twice over. That sentence didn't really belong there. Whatever. Quite frankly, it morally offends me that essentially the only way to achieve an education in America is to accept such predatory loans that entitle these already established people to many, many years worth of my labors, your labors. I feel completely ostracized by society by the fact that I am expected to beg and prostrate myself just to acquire the most inconsequentially menial of labor tasks so that I might spend the next half of a decade giving literally all of the products of my efforts and labor to these predatory loan assholes and a bunch of property management assholes and the whatever corporate establishment so generously offered me a shitty menial labor position. Um, as such, being so out of touch with, what everybody else considers normal, it would be far more effective for the sake of my own suffering just to die. That's just a fact. Anyways, very few things make me happier than fantasizing about my own death. In a world that has denied me any capacity for self-actualization and where shallow idiots constantly claw at each other with inconsequential judgments, I cannot imagine any way to achieve true happiness. Man, I am really obviously cyclical and repetitive with all this shit, but what do you expect? It's depression, it's a spiral of downward bullshit. Anyways, even if I did find a way to alleviate my debts, acquire my own property, and find someone worthy of loving, I would still feel like an evil tool if I were forced to be taxed by the American government with all of its nefarious warmongering, amoral prison industrial enslavement, and installments of oppressive and violent regimes around the world. So I sit here alone, essentially incapable of true joy, wanting to die, but not wanting to sadden anybody else's rosy worldview with my shadows. What can be done? Unless someone can show me that there is hope and opportunity in this world, I will never find it. But I see that it exists for others, and I'm glad that so many of you find your own happiness in spite of it all. Yeah, that's it. Have a good one, Internet.